All right, so to some of you, I look pretty crazy right now because you're used to seeing me in an element like in the studio or writing songs or something like that. But another thing that I do also is I'm a minister. Yep, you heard right. I'm a minister. And a lot of times, even as a minister, when I'm in the studios and doing things, I incorporate the things that I've learned in my ministry works to be able to help me push through. Because y'all, being a creative ain't easy. And so a lot of times when I'm doing my Bible studies and I'm looking for things or searching for answers from God, oftentimes I go right here to the Bible after praying. I just figured, man, that I would start sharing some of the things that I've been learning myself. And so I think I'll start calling this segment Sunday School with Pat. All right, cool. Let's jump right in. I'm reading from the Christian Standard Bible. Okay, let's look at John chapter 5. We're going to start at verse 1. It says, After this, a Jewish festival took place and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. So we find ourselves here in a time where there's a festival going on. And so if you think about, festivals, there's a lot of people, think a lot of vendors. Put yourself in this place while we're reading. It says, by the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there is a pool called Bethesda in Aramaic, which has five colonnades. All right, so that's something very, very interesting because the sheep gate we learn in the book of Nehemiah is the place where they brought the sheep for sacrifice. This place is the place where the sheep basically come to die. And then it says that there's a pool there which has five colonnades. A lot of times and oftentimes, I'm not saying that this is the case, but this is I'm wanting to educate you on cultural context. You see the colonnades, and that is a sign of like paganism, right? There's a sign of something within culture that the world has brought in, be it like a deity or other gods or other worship or anything like that. Now I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening here, but I feel like John made it a point to say that there was five colonnades by this. And so we're just speaking from cultural context here. And it says within these lay a large number of the disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed. So we got a lot of people hurt, a lot of people with disabilities in this one space. They're sitting here and they're coming here because they want to be healed, right? And so, because this is the place that culture has accepted to be the place of healing. So, if you have a problem, if you have something going on, then you come here for that, right? You come here to be healed for that. We're looking at verse 5. It says, One man there who had been disabled for 38 years. Now, we have a man that has been sitting at this pool for 38 years and he hasn't yet received his healing. Yet, this is the place that culture says that you are supposed to go to be able to receive your healing. Verse 6 it says, When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, Do you want to get well? Now, I find that funny, y'all, because isn't that a question that we would ask, when we see people that have been doing the same things, over and over, expecting, something different to happen? Do you really want to get healthy? Do you really want to be successful? Do you really want to, like, is this something that you really want to do, or are you just playing with this? I feel like this is the perspective that Jesus is coming from. And I find it interesting that his answer, verse 7, it says, Sir, the disabled man answered, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me. This is where it really got to me, and and I'm sure that there's other people that can agree. We get to this place where we've done everything that we know to do. We've dotted all the I's, we've crossed all the T's, trying to get to the space that we want to be at. We're following all the rules. We're going through the blueprints, you know what I'm saying? We built our skill level up, but yet nothing is happening for us personally. And it can be very, very difficult when you're watching other things work for other people, but then those things don't work for you. And I think that's where the enemy a lot of times wants to have us at, is in a space questioning whether or not God really said what he said. Jesus said something interesting right after that. He says in verse 8, he says, Get up, Jesus told him, pick up your mat and walk. Instantly, the man got well. picked up his mat and started to walk. A lot of times I've heard this message preached, and it was preached as if the man was lame. It doesn't say that the man was lame, it just says that he was disabled, right? And I would argue with the lame statement because the man says in verse 7, when you go out, it says, "But while I'm coming, someone gets down ahead of me," which says that he's trying to get there. So this man is not paralyzed, but he does have a disability, right? And so Jesus tells him to get up, pick up his mat, and walk. A great miracle, yes. But in all actuality, Jesus asked him to do something very, very simple: pick up your mat and walk. Maybe the way of the culture isn't the right way. Maybe there's a different way. Maybe there is promise and purpose for your life, but you've been in this space trying to do this thing one way because culture says do this. And it ain't been working for you. But it's not because the promise isn't real, but it's because your process isn't effective. We can't be in a space where we get a call from God or a promise from God, and then we go out and try to do it our own way. It's not going to work like that. It's never going to work like that. We have to make sure that we are hearing God throughout the process and just being obedient. Jesus says, "Hey man, if you want to get well, you need to pick up your mat and walk. You need to leave your current way of doing things because you've been sitting here for 38 years watching people, and the enemy has you stressed out." Jesus tells him to pick up his mat and walk. That is the day of the Sabbath. It says, now that day was the Sabbath. Well, I find it very interesting here because that is currently against Jewish law. It is against the law to pick up his mat and walk. So now we're stuck in a situation where this doesn't make sense in culture, and it doesn't make sense even on this religious side, even on the things that I was taught, religiously as a kid. I think that what we really have to do is focus in, get the instructions from God, allow Him to be able to tell us how to go. And when He says go, pick up that mat and walk.